jump into actually answering review questions, I want to point out the formula chart that I posted up on the board for the quiz is the same formula chart that you're going to have on the test. So it'll have this image that shows a rotation graphic, a reflection graphic, and a translation graphic. Remember, translate means to slide, reflect means to flip, and rotate means to turn. Okay. And then all of the actual rules for those are on that formula chart. So here's what happens to your X and Y if you flip over the 3 different lines of reflection or lines of symmetry we talked about. Okay, here's what happens when you translate or slide your image. This slide is the only one that has plus and minuses. Okay, so if you see a rule that has a plus or a minus, you know it's a translation, you know it's a slide. Okay, because remember, if it's along the X, plus is to the right, minus is to the left. If it's along the Y, down is minus, up is add. Okay, and for rotation, rotation is the turn. Okay, and this depends on if you're going 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees. Okay, in which direction. Okay, so oh, you know what? This one, I'm going to change this part really fast because this doesn't have the clockwise versus counterclockwise. So let me fix that real fast. I'm just going to grab a different one to copy that from.
No.
Okay, so there's the translate. There's the rotate. And this one has it shown, and this is what you'll have. Okay, you can look at clockwise versus counterclockwise. Okay, and remember, anytime you see that negative in front of the X or Y in a rule for a rotation or up here in a reflection, that plus or minus, or excuse me, that minus just means to change the sign. Okay, it needs to be the opposite. So if it started out positive, you need to make it negative. If it started out negative, you need to make it positive. Okay, that minus just means it should change to the opposite sign of what it started as. Okay, so this is going to be given to you. It'll be built in the AWARE test, and we'll give you a hard copy, like on a paper. So you'll have this on one side, and you can do your scratch work on the other side. All right. So again, this review, we are having you submit. I need the side conversations to stop, please. You can you need to submit this in AWARE. Okay, if you just do this on paper, you're still going to get a 0 because I'm pulling your grade from AWARE. You're not turning this paper into me. I'm not grading the paper. You are putting your answers into AWARE. We're practicing the types of questions in AWARE prior to the test. Okay, so that the test isn't the first time you've seen that type of question, like the formatting in AWARE and everything. Okay, this paper was just for you to have to do your scratch work and stuff on. Okay. So we'll start here with number 1. It says if the coordinates of M are -4, -2, and the coordinates of M prime are -1, -5, what is the rule for this translation? Okay, so I can immediately see, okay, so this is what I'm starting with, and this is what it's changed to. That is not just changing signs or switching the order of them, is it? No. So I immediately know that is not a reflection or a rotation, because the reflection and rotation rules, remember, you look at those, they just switch the order or change the signs, okay? But all of the numbers actually stay the same, okay? Here, translate, you're adding and subtracting, and that's going to change the numbers because you're adding or subtracting some value to it. or from it. Okay, so I know right away this has got to be a translation. Okay, so I know it's a translation. Now I just have to figure out what translation. So how did my x go from -4 to -1? How did I get from -4 to -1? Did I add or subtract? You need to picture a number line. Picture a number line. Here's -4. Here's -1. How did I get from -4 to -1? I moved to the right 3, didn't I? Is going to the right adding or subtracting? Adding. So we added 3 to the x value. Okay, so the x value, we added 3. Okay, what about for the y? How did I get, okay, so this, I'll do x in green here, do y in red. How did I get from -2 to -5? You need to picture the number line again. Picture the number line. We're starting at -2, and we're going to -5. So I start at -2, and I get to -5. How much do I move? As I think you can count. How many did I move? In what direction? In the negative direction, right? Okay, so I went this way. That's negative. This one I went this way. That was positive. Okay, so for the y, I'm going -3. So I subtracted 3 from the y. You don't have to show all this work to be able to do this. I'm just trying to get you to visualize things to understand. We're figuring out, how did I get from m to m prime? I added 3 to the x. I subtracted 3 from the y. So writing that as a rule, I would say, make some room here. My xy becomes x plus 3, y minus 3. Okay, if it was asking for it in words, you could say, write 3 down 3. Translation, write 3 down 3. Do you feel okay about that? All right. Number 2 says a figure is translated 5 units down and 2 units right. Which rule would return the figure to its original position? So we have to read carefully. They're not asking for the rule of what was just stated. They don't want the rule for 5 down, 2 right. They want the rule to return, to go back to where you started. So wouldn't that have to be the opposite of what you did to get there? Do you want to go back? Okay, so 5 down and 2 right, what is going to be the opposite of that? Up 5, left 2. So that is the rule that we need to pick here. So up 5, is that your X or your Y going up? Up and down that's Y. So we're going up. So we're adding 5 to Y. There it is. Okay. Left is your X. Left and right is your X. Okay, so X is subtracting 2. There it is. So that was answer choice D here. We feel okay about that one? Okay. Number 3, they say which of the following transformation maps figure A to figure B? Okay, so figure A is my pre-image. That's what I'm starting with. Okay, so I start here at the blue one. Okay, and then I go to figure B, this purple one. Okay, so figure A, blue, to figure B, purple. So how do I get from the blue to the purple? Now, the only choices are reflection and a translation. They're both combo. So you could do a couple of things. You could visualize this in your head. Some of you are better at doing that. If I reflect this across the x-axis, it comes upside down and it makes this purple shape, but it's over here. Okay, if I reflect it down, so I would reflect it down and then slide it to the right. Okay. This other choice, the ones that say, so that's going over the x-axis, which it is. If I were to reflect this over the y-axis, if I flipped it to the right, that top pointy corner would be on the right side, up, right? Y'all agree? That's not what this image looks like. So we are not flipping it over the y-axis. So C and D are immediately out. Just the orientation should tell you this is flipped upside down, not to the side. So we go over the x-axis and then it slides to the right. To get from the blue to the purple, you're going to have to go to the right. Okay, both of these say to go to the right, but how much? So when I flip this over, if you want to visualize it, I'll do it in a dashed line here. Okay, that's when you flip it, what it would look like. Is that shifted over just one? Does this point correspond to this point? No, this corner here would correspond to this corner. I have to go all the way over. That's 5 units. Okay, so that's a way of thinking about that, is doing the visualizing of the movement. Another way would be to take one of your vertices, one of your corners, just pick the point and do the rule and check if it ends up where it is on the new image. So I know this pointy corner corresponds to this pointy corner here. So I could apply that. I could take this and I say, this is at -7, +7, and apply this rule and see if it gets me here, which is at -2, -7. Okay, and if it doesn't, then that doesn't work. And then check the next one. And you could go through and check your choices with those ordered pairs. That's another option. All right, number 4 says, which of the following transformations map figure T onto figure U? Okay, so same concept. They've got it colored here for us already though. So figure T is what I'm starting with. That's the blue one. And then figure U, that's where I end up. So T is the pre-image, U is the image. Okay, so I know the orientation changes. So I've got this reflection and then a translation. Okay, so again, visualize if this is a reflection over the X or the Y. Which one would make the orientation look like this? Okay, again, some of you are better at visualizing that than others, but if I were to sketch this on here, get a dashed line, if I reflected this up above the x-axis, that would point would go here. All right, so if I reflected it over the X, here's the orientation that it would be. What? There we go. Okay, but if I reflected it over the Y, here's the orientation that it would be. So which one has the correct orientation for that U? Which reflection? The one over the X axis here. See how the shorter side is of these parallel ones? The shorter one is below. Here's the shorter of the parallel one. Okay, if the dashed lines are hard to see, draw them solid. It will let me draw. Okay, so that's the shape of this U. Okay, that's the orientation of the U. And now we need to figure out how far it's shifted. So this point would correspond to this point. So we know it's over the x-axis, not the y. Okay, and so then it shift. This one says left versus right. To get from here to here, do I need to go left or right? Left. So it's flipped up over the x-axis and then shifted left 6. All right, number 5 says the triangle shown will be reflected over the y and then reflected over the x. Which transformation will produce the same image? Okay, so you can check this graphically like we just did and do the reflections and actually look at the image, or you can use your rules. Okay, pick one of your points. Okay, so point T here is at -6, 2. If I reflect over the y-axis and then the x-axis, look at those rules. Okay, they're in your notes and they're going to be on your formula chart. Okay, here's your reflection rules. So it says reflect over the y-axis. That means the x value is going to change signs. And then I reflect over the x-axis. That means the y value is going to change signs. So what I end up doing so T prime is after the y-axis reflection. Okay, if I go over the y stays the same. So the x is going to change to +6. The y is going to stay as is. Then I'm going to reflect over the x-axis. So my T double prime, when you reflect over the x-axis, the x stays the same. So it was a 6, so it stays 6, but the y changes. So now the y is going to change to -2. So this is where T ends up after both reflections. So they're asking which of these would also make that same change. Which of those would also get your X, Y to have those same effects? Hang on, let me grab the phone. The counseling center. Still our counselors. Okay. So as I was saying, I'm looking for which of these other choices, A, B, C, or D, would get us from here to here. Okay, so you would go look at the rules. Okay, this says rotate 90 degrees, rotate 180 degrees. Now, they didn't even specify a direction, so we need to check both clockwise and counterclockwise. 90, and then 180, it doesn't matter because 180 clockwise or counterclockwise gets you to the same place. Translating, we should be able to go ahead and eliminate these because translating, you're adding and subtracting numbers. Okay, and my numbers they're just switching signs, aren't they? So translating typically is not just going to switch the signs. Okay, we could try it. You could check it. So 2 units up, that would mean add 2 to the y. 2 plus 2 would be 4. That does not become 4. So I know that C is out. Okay, 9 units up would be adding 9 to the y. 9 plus 2 is 11. That's not 11. So that doesn't work either. Okay, so we know it's not the translation. It's got to be some sort of rotation. So I'm going to go check those rules for 90 and 180. Okay, so 180, look here. It doesn't matter if it's clockwise or counterclockwise, it's the same rule. Okay, your X changes sign. Your Y changes sign. Isn't that what we ended up doing with both reflections? That's the one. Okay, if you double check your 90, the X and the Y switch locations in these rules. Okay, our X and Y did not switch locations. Okay, the 6 stayed in the X spot and the 2 stayed in the Y spot. The only thing that happened was that they changed signs. So this rule for rotating 180 said you change the sign of X and change the sign of Y. So rotating 180 degrees is equivalent to reflecting over both axes. It gets you the same result. Does that make sense? So a 180 rotation is the same as reflecting over both axes. Questions on the front? All right, keep going. Let's look at 6. Okay, so on number 6, it says the figure in the graph on the right will be transformed in such a way that XY becomes Y negative X, which figure shows the result. Okay, so you can either take points and test this, or you can look at your rules and see which one this is and visualize that change. Some of you are better at that visualizing concept. Okay, I think more of you, it might be better to just take one of your points. There are 6 vertices here. Just pick one to check. It doesn't really matter which one. So let's check this top left one. Okay, so it starts out at -1, 6. And the rule says to change the order of the X and the Y, but the Y keeps its sign, so it's going to stay as 6. And then the X changes sign. That's what that minus means. It means change the sign. So instead of -1, it's going to become +1. So which of these has that corner, that spiky corner that's jutted out the furthest at 6, 1? Okay, so here it has it at 1, -6. That's not what we wanted. Here it has it at 6, 1. That's it. You can check the others, but they are wrong. Y'all see that? So I just checked that one point. I didn't have to check all of them. We feel okay about that? All right, C is just plotting a point. It says your point C starts at 5, -8 and is rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise and then reflected across the x-axis, or excuse me, across the y equals x. So we have to find both of these rules and then apply them in the right order. Okay, So I'm going to have C, which starts out at 5, -8. Okay, the rule for rotating 90 degrees clockwise, you'll be able to look at your formula chart. Did it say counterclockwise or clockwise? I already forgot. Is it clockwise? It says counterclockwise? Okay. So 90 degrees counterclockwise, this is the rule. Okay, so we're going to take our x, y, and it's become -y, x. This is the rule. So I'm going to apply that here, and I'm going to get C prime. So I'm switching the order. The x keeps its sign, the y changes sign. So the x stays 5, the y changes from -8 to +8. And they switch spots, right? Okay, now I need to apply the rule for reflecting across the line y equals x. So again, you'll look at your formula chart. Reflecting across the line y equals x just says to switch their spot. None of the signs change. So xy becomes yx. So my C double prime, I just switch their spots. So the 8, 5 becomes 5, 8. And then my question doesn't ask for the ordered pair. It asks you to plot the point. So we have to go, and that is a typo up here because that does say C prime. That should say C double prime. It wants the final location after both. Okay, so after both transformations, I go to 5, 8. Right up there on the edge. So when you're doing this in Aware, you're simply plotting the point. And you got to do this work to figure it out, and then you plot your point. All right, number 8. On the coordinate grid, a triangle with vertices ABC is translated to A prime, B prime, C prime, which transformation occurred. Okay, so let's look at how, like the corresponding. So A to A prime. Did anything change there? Between A and A prime? Those are exactly the same. Nothing changed. Okay, so that doesn't really help us. So let's look at the next one. B to B prime. The y didn't change. It stayed -1, -1. But the x changed. Our x went from negative to positive. So the x changed signs. The y stayed as is. Let's see if that's the same rule for the last one. C to C prime, just double check it. Did the x change sign and the y stayed the same? Yep. The reason A didn't is because x was 0 and 0 doesn't have a sign. So that's why A looked like there was no change. But in all the other points that weren't at 0, the x changed signs, the y did not. So if you know the rule, you can look on your list and look for, okay, which rule makes x change sign, but y stay the same? Does anybody know it without going to look? When they keep their order and only one of them changes sign, it's a reflection. And yeah, you need to remember if y stays the same, you're reflecting over the y. If x stays the same, you're reflecting over the x. So since y stayed the same, I'm reflecting over or across the y. Okay, and that's on the formula chart. So once you figure out the rule, just see what it says on the formula chart. All right, and number 9, it says point B has coordinates of -4, 6. It's reflected across the y-axis and then rotated. What are the coordinates of B prime and then B double prime? So they want us to do both of those. So I'm going to find the rule. We actually just said the rule, reflected across the y-axis. That's what we just did in number 8. We said the x is going to change signs, but the y is going to stay the same. Write the rule again if you need to. You're going to switch the sign of x and leave y alone. Okay, so for -4, 6, that's going to become +4, 6. Because we changed the sign of x and left y alone. Now rotating 180 degrees, the counterclockwise doesn't matter, because remember 180 is half a circle, so it doesn't matter which direction you turn. If you go half a circle, it's the same. This is the one where you change the sign of both x and y. You don't switch their order, you just change their sign from whatever they are. So your x, y, whatever it is, becomes -x, -y. So my 4, 6 becomes -4, -6. We feel okay about that one? All right. This is probably maybe the last one we can, I don't know, maybe we'll get to 11 and then I'll do the rest in a separate video. Number 10 says, which of the following represents a translation of the figure? So this is the figure that we're starting with here in quadrant 2. Okay, with the long edge on the left. Okay, which one is a translation? Which of these 4 pictures is a translation? So translate is slide. Okay, which one is, so it keeps its orientation. So it stays like it's in the same direction. It just slides. So which one is just a slide? Which of these 4 images down here? That second one. See, it goes down and to the right. Okay, that's a translation. Okay, so that's A. Okay, B, which of the following is a rotation 90 degrees clockwise? Okay, rotate means to turn 90 degrees clockwise. So which the clock ticks, if we're at the top, it goes to the right. Okay, so 90-degree turn to the right. That'd be this one. And if it's 90 degrees, it's just going to move over 1 quadrant. Okay, because that quadrant, each quadrant is a 90-degree angle. Okay, so that is B. That's your rotate. Okay, and then C says, which one's a rotation 180 degrees clockwise? Also a turn for rotation. 180 degrees is a half a circle. So it should end up in the opposite quadrant. So if we start in quadrant 2, we should end, in quadrant 2, we should end down here in quadrant 4. Because if I rotate around, that was 90. Another 90 would be 180, would put me here. Okay, so rotated a half a circle. And it doesn't matter. I drew that clockwise. Counterclockwise is the same place, isn't it? Half a circle. Okay, so this one's a rotate 180. All right, so last but not least, that it must be the one that's left, but let's check it. This one says rotate, then translate. So rotate or turn and then slide. Because the 180-degree rotation we said would put you oh, it doesn't say where to slide it. Okay, so that works. All right, so it doesn't say how far they want it to slide. So it would rotate it around here, we said. So rotate like this and then slide over. Does that make sense? All right. Let's go ahead and do 11 and we'll stop this video. So point E has coordinates at 3, 7. It's reflected across the x-axis and then is translated along using this rule. What are the coordinates of E double prime? So double prime is after the 2 transformations. So we'll do one at a time. So first, let's reflect it across the x-axis. So we said reflecting across the y doesn't change. When we're reflecting across the x doesn't change, but the y does. Okay, so that means my 3, 7 will become 3, -7. So that's after the first change. Then they ask you to translate it using this rule. So subtract 5 from x and subtract 4 from y. So your E double prime, 3 minus 5 is -2, and -7 minus 4 is -11. So that's where you would end up for E double prime. All right. Stop this video. I will post the videos and the completed review this afternoon. It is due tomorrow.
Just a reminder for students who signed up for the American Mathematics Competition, the